we need to change the leadership recruitment scheme in this country. It is what is holding down the young people. Today, it's very difficult for anybody who is not within the political space, who is not beholden to the powers that be, the godfather, the governors of states and the local government. It's very difficult for them to break into the political space. So these are some of the things we need to change for Macron's idea to work. But we must realize that the situation in France that encouraged a Macron to run does not exist in this country.
Well, France has been known for revolution, so no surprise there.
Absolutely. So is their culture.
Exactly. He did mention, though, the issue of global trade, and right now you have the U.S. and China threatening to start what could become one of the biggest trade wars in history, as they both continue to impose tariffs on goods from either country. Could President Macron's advice here on the inclusiveness of the middle class have come in handy, seeing that a lot of local businesses on either side would be affected by these tariffs?
You will recall that President Macron was the first to invite Donald Trump to France, massaged his ego, and had also visited to persuade the president of the United States, to realize or to understand that some of the issues that he frequently complained about can be resolved within some global institutions, of which the president of the United States has not agreed to and has decided to impose tariffs on a number of countries. And these countries are currently retaliating, which is why we now have what we call the trade war. But the truth is that this is a war nobody would win, and everybody is probably going to pay a price for this war. But you're right. The point he made about the inclusiveness of the middle class is correct, because you see, when you look at all the countries where there's been tremendous changes, the rise of nationalism and the rest of it, when you look at the circumstances that brought Trump to power, it also has to do with the anger of some sections of the middle class, like in the United States, for example, the middle America, the rural America, who felt that the economy has left them behind and has moved to areas like New York, California, and the rest of them. So in a way, he was right about alluding to that middle class, that we need to create an inclusiveness that involved the middle class. And that we first, in our own case, we need to recreate that middle class.
Yeah, so here is President Macron endorsing the Continental Free Trade Agreement for Africa, saying the more we can build common access and free trade, the better. Do you think the rest of Europe and the rest of the world indeed would love to see more trade between African countries, knowing that it could affect trade with them as well? And do you also think that this could help stem the mass migration of people to Europe eventually?
For as long as I can remember, and if one wants to be fair to Europe and the rest of the world, even the United States, they've always been interested in seeing African trade increase. They've always been interested in Africa trading with them. You remember, for example, that when you look at the first major agreement that was signed between Europe and Africa, the Lomé Trade Agreement, which survived for so many years, and I think it's gone through a number of changes. Or when you look at the United States, AGOA, these are all efforts by these countries or these regions to encourage trade between Africa and the other continents. The problem is that Africa has not lived up to expectation. Africa has not taken the opportunity of these agreements to expand its trade. And that is why we find ourselves where we are today. When you take AGOA, for example, or when you go back to that Lomé, first the Lomé 1, Lomé 2, Lomé 3, I think, and it has changed its name along the line. There are so many things there that Africa could have benefited from if only African leaders are focused on developing, the continent itself. But these were also years in which wars, coups, instability reigned in the continent. And so we focus more on trying to resolve this crisis than on economic issues. But look, if we have to survive, even today in a country like Nigeria, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that we need to focus on economic development in order for us to survive. And in our case, our population is growing at a tremendous rate, and nothing but creating that avenue that improves trade, that enables us to trade not just with our neighbors, but with the rest of the world. Look, when you look at the countries that have made it, they've made it from trading with the rest of the world. And that's exactly what we need to do. That's exactly what Africa has to do, too.
Yeah, and President Macron couldn't have said it any better. But looking at migration, he said many of the countries in Africa where the influx is coming from are not in crisis. He mentioned Senegal, he mentioned Nigeria, he mentioned Ghana, and even some of the other Francophone countries around us. Yet, the UN reports that many of the world's hungry and poor are found here in Africa, and that these conditions are caused by wars and crisis.
Look, the president was absolutely right in what he said. There's a difference between a country that is at war and a country that is not at war. We probably, we have a lot of challenges in this country. We have serious economic challenges, but look, that's not really an excuse for people to go through the kind of journey they're going through to get to Europe. And he's right to observe, look, when you welcome refugees from Syria, from Libya, from Iraq or Iran, and from Afghanistan, and from Sudan, as he mentioned, these are countries at war, and people can understand why people are running away from the crisis for their own survival. But in some peaceful countries with skirmishes here and there, like ours, or like, in fact, I'm not even sure there's anything happening in Senegal. It's an economic issue. And it goes back to what the president said about good governance, and development. That if you, and he made the point very clearly when he talked about migration, to say that if we fail to develop in Africa, Europe is going to suffer. And if Europe does not open its doors for trade through Africa, Africa is going to suffer. So one way or the other, both continents will suffer, either here as a result of bad governance and the refusal of our leaders, to do the right thing, and the fact that Europe itself wants to close its borders, or are coming up with stringent regulations that would, impact trade. Whichever way, the president was very clear about this, that it will pay nobody. And so the solution for him is for both parties or both continents to do something to address the core economic issues, that is encouraging poverty, or that is enabling people in peaceful environments to begin to migrate and going through, tedious journey to Europe.